the mindset from, oh, here we go, we have to deal with this Title IX stuff, or, we're forced to do this, to it's the right way to approach things, and it's the right way to approach athletics. And that's the kind of the tough piece of changing people's mindsets, to understand it's the right way to operate. And that's a challenge. That's a challenge with coaches. That's a challenge with parents. It's a challenge sometimes with administrators, but it is the right way to operate. It is the right way to do things. Most importantly, and why I'm happy to share this presentation with you, is because having worked with Mr. Hughes and Dr. Moore here, and watching them work with this and work with our coaches and what they've done in the Sweetwater District, by far I've been parts of lots of other Title IX presentations and Title IX workshops and those things. And these two gentlemen do a phenomenal job of putting it in a set of terms that are easy to understand. It's very interactive, and it definitely makes you reflect back on how you're operating. It will scare some people. I will tell you right now, it will scare some people, and it will open some people's eyes, and they'll be like, holy smokes, I've never thought of some of those things. But at the end of the day, we want to provide you with all the tools necessary to be able to take back your sites, take back your districts, your conferences. And again, at the end of the day, making sure we're doing the right things and doing them the right way that they should be done, because ultimately equity in athletics is the key to where we're going. And Title IX is a big part of that. So I'm done yapping. I'm done talking. I'm more than happy to have the honor and privilege of introducing again Mr. Bob Hughes and Dr. Vernon Moore from the Sweetwater District. Dr. Moore is the conference president for the Metro Conference. Mr. Hughes worked in compliance as a program manager for a long time. He is now the principal of Hilltop Middle School, but still actively involved in what goes on in the athletics in regards to Title IX in the Sweetwater District. And again, very lucky to have him. Before I let them go, Todd Cass, anything else you want to say before we get started?
Thanks, Joe. I just want to make sure to thank Mr. Hughes and Dr. Moore for being here with us today. And this is a training that I saw when I moved to the district office in the Poway Unified School District. The very first thing I realized is we really need to get a handle on Title IX, and I needed to find people in our section that really knew the most information that could help me. And Dr. Moore and Mr. Hughes were the first people I went to, and I can tell you, and I'd encourage you to take some notes today, because you're going to have some questions come along that, you have some experts here that can help you out and who've been through it on both sides, the legal side as well. So I highly encourage you to take notes. And if you even have questions later on, don't hesitate to reach out to Joe or myself.
Okay, Dr. Moore, take it away.
All right. Make sure my co-host is with us, Mr. Hughes.
I'm here, Dr. Moore.
Perfect. And I was looking through the list of names, and I see a lot of my Castle Park friends with us, and want to make sure that I give a shout out to the principal of Castle Park High School, Vicki Mitrovich, the assistant principal, Michelle Owens, as well as the athletic director, Bertie Ansel-Lovaher, because and all the coaches. I know some Castle Park coaches are on the call as well. What Bob and I are going to share with you has really been a labor of love. It's been some things have been challenging, but in the end, and I probably begin and end my discussions with Title IX about this. If having more students participate in the great things that we offer, particularly having more female students get involved in our athletics program, if that's the result of this work, then the work is absolutely worth it. I just want to take a moment. This is a page that we have from the newspaper that it came out in July, and it was really a nice article that we had about the girls lacrosse team at Castle Park High School. And I noticed that Coach Chris Krajewski is on the call as well, so give a little shout out to him. He's really been working hard these past few years building up this program, and they made the front page of the sports section with that hard work and got the team profiled, and he's actually had some success in getting some girls into college from that lacrosse team. And so really, that's the epitome of the work that we've done, I think, is having a viable program like that and getting kids into college. So without further ado, um, if you don't know me, I'm the Chief Compliance Officer of the Sweetwater Union High School District. Prior to that, I had some time in the San Diego Unified School District, working also with Mr. Hughes. Mr. Hughes, you want to just give a brief introduction?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Bob Hughes. I'm the principal of Hilltop Middle School. For many years, I worked with Dr. Moore in the compliance office and Mr. Hines as partners in this quest to make sure that we are moving from compliance to commitment when it comes to opportunities for girls in sports. And I want to reiterate what Mr. Hines said today. You know, a lot of us in here have done a lot of things. I coached football and wrestling for a very long time at Eastlake High School. I've been an athletic administrator, I've been an ASB dean, seen all those hats. And I will tell you, my 30-year-old self probably would have had this training and rolled my eyes and been like, "You're crazy. This is not true." So we might seem like we're being hyperbolic or we're making things up today, but we're not. And it might seem like a scared straight edition for you guys. We don't mean it to be that, and we'll always be available to you afterwards, after this presentation. You find out when you're in a compliance office in Sweetwater that you're kind of a rock star with Title IX, because the All-Year versus Sweetwater case, even across the nation in the Association of Title IX Investigators, is something that people always recognize. So we're going to give you a lot of information, and please have a growth mindset and a paradigm shift, and we'll give you all the ins and outs of being successful.
Also, thank you, Mr. Hughes. We'll also give you our contact information. So if you have any questions about any of the slides or any information that we present, let us know. It appears that this meeting is being recorded, so if you, I'm sure if you want to watch it again and again and again, you can talk to Mr. Hines, and he'll make that available for you. Oh, let's go. Here we go. So just a brief overview. Title IX, in 1972, there was some amendments, and Title IX was the amendment to some educational laws regarding discrimination based on gender. And essentially, Title IX prohibits any federally funded program or institution or agency from discriminating against folks based on gender. Now, it was, I think in its origination really focused on collegiate level athletics and programs. And this is a magazine, Time magazine cover from 1978. But what, ultimately, has grown out of this, if you will, is that all programs, not just athletics, but your robotics program, and this is if your school and school district receives federal funds, which just about means anybody. And as we'll share with you later on in the presentation, as the Sweetwater Union High School District found out, it's not just collegiate sports, it's K-12. And so it's not just athletics, it's all of the programs on your schools and at your campuses are subject to this non-discrimination clause, and that you need to be very mindful and considerate of the equity as it relates to male and female in the programs that you offer. There's been a huge impact of Title IX. In 1972, at the collegiate level, we had probably about 30,000 female athletes competing at the collegiate level, and 170,000 male athletes. And at the high school level, about 1 in 27 girls played sports, and throughout the nation, we had just under 300,000 girls in high school sports. Fast forward to today, or this was maybe even a couple years ago, you'll see the huge increase in female athletes to about 193,000. Still at the collegiate level, and there was a huge story on 60 Minutes just this past Sunday about collegiate level athletics, male and female, and how in order to make budget cuts and preserve football, which is mostly a male-dominated sport, there were colleges and universities making cuts to their programs, other male programs, in order to make sure that they could preserve their male program. And we'll talk a little bit about that and substantial proportionality and all of those things. So what you'll see is that even now, there are not as many female athletes as there are male. However, the number is growing. You've seen a huge increase in girls athletics and girls programs. In fact, the Olympic team for the first time ever in 2016 sent more female athletes from America than male athletes to compete in the Olympics. And the soccer team, our women's U.S. soccer team, there's an article from The Guardian in 2019 when they won the World Cup that points directly to the fact that Title IX has had a huge impact in creating such a competitive team for female athletes, women athletes, on the world stage in America. So the reason why we keep winning the Soccer World Cup is because our athletes have been training, and we get the best female athletes on the planet. And so that is the impact. And as I said at the top of this, if this means you're getting more folks to be involved in your sports, then that's a good thing.
All right, so a lot of what Title IX deals with is athletics, and we're going to talk primarily about that today. But I do want everyone to understand that the bulk of Title IX that's been recently, and what I mean by recently is the period between the Obama administration's Dear Colleague letter in 2011 through to Becky DeVos's final rule making in her tenure. Most of what you're going to see about Title IX right now is all about sexual misconduct and sexual harassment especially at the collegiate level, which often involves athletes that are accused of misconduct, but it has evolved in many ways. Under the Obama administration, there was a Dear Colleague letter that basically had 4 tenets. You need to stop harassment from happening, you need to investigate it, you need to provide a remedy, and then you need to prevent it from happening again. The Trump administration under DeVos changed the Title IX to a final rule, and they kind of expanded a lot of things and contracted a lot of things, to be quite honest. So what I need all of you to understand is that you should be looking also at your sexual harassment policies and administrative regulations for your district. Dr. Moore and I did not just handle athletics in terms of Title IX. We also handled all of the sexual harassment complaints within our district, whether it be teacher to student, teacher to teacher, community member to teacher, whatever it was. Some of the things that you'll see now in the final rule letter is like definitions of consent and what it means to consent to have sexual activity. You'll see an expansion of due process rights for the accused, and you'll see really a new process for hearings and the ability for the accused to offer any kind of evidence. Next slide, Dr. Moore. So if you look at a lot of the Title IX news that comes out in the newspapers across the nation, and Dr. Moore and I belong to a group called the TICSA, the Association of Title IX Investigators, and at 6 a.m. in the morning, every morning, we get the newest slew of Title IX lawsuit. It's actually a service that TICSA provides to us that shows us all the Title IX lawsuits that are in the news throughout the nation. So some of these are very, disturbing. The one that is really outstanding here for this group is the lawsuit that a basketball coach was accused of having sex with one of his players. And when the player went to the principal to report the misconduct, the basketball player alleges that she was then sexually harassed by the principal, and the principal wanted to meet with her and be able to text her and do the things that she was complaining about the basketball coach doing. So that lawsuit happened, and it's a big, you start adding zeros to the settlement figures as these things come out. So we'll be talking a little bit about sexual harassment today, but the bulk of what we'll be talking about is how it pertains to athletics.
So Title IX is still, the athletic equity portion of Title IX is still very relevant and alive. And even though the headlines tend to be dominated by the sexual misconduct allegations, there are still groups that are patrolling and looking for Title IX inequities, particularly in athletics. And one of them is legal aid at work, and the component of legal aid at work is fair play for girls in sports. And these are a group of attorneys that Bob and I have worked extensively with in terms of with our compliance plan, Title IX compliance plan here in the Sweetwater district. And what I will tell you about them, is in addition to, being a law firm, they have a ton of active lawsuits and lawsuits that they've recently closed. For example, in Red Bluff, they finally reached a settlement in their Title IX case that came up. It was a couple of years long. I think 2016 it started, and then by the close of 2017 they were reaching a settlement. And this was a classic athletic Title IX discrimination case involving boys and girls basketball and access to facilities and coach retaliation. When Bob and I looked at this case in 2017, when we looked at the case file, it read a lot like the Castle Park case file from 2000, started in 2004, and going into 2007, with finally, it started in 2007, going to 2014 is when it was finally closed out. And so we'll talk again about that case. But many of this, it was almost like they used the Castle Park case as the template for this Red Bluff case. There was a case in Lake Oswego schools, same thing, Title IX lawsuit around sports and access to facilities. Santa Clara had to work again with the same group, Legal Aid at Work, Fair Play Girls in Sports, to resolve a Title IX conflict. And Campbell High in Hawaii most recently had a Title IX case about school programs. This case involved shutting down of specific teams. And I know there's been even some cases in LA County and San Francisco and Oakland schools have just reached a settlement again around Title IX. And there's a few law firms that really focus on this work, but Legal Aid at Work is one of the primary ones that does this.
Dr. Moore, can I jump in there for just a second?
Absolutely.
So I do want to look at some of the commonalities in those cases, and I want to make sure that people are aware, and I really suggest that you read these articles because there's a tipping point. There is a tipping point that you'll see in these cases, and that tipping point typically was the retaliation against the employee or the students who brought the complaint to the administration. So if you look at the Hawaii case, there's a lot of language around how the girl athletes actually went to the principal, and the principal just his first inclination was to say, well, we can just cancel girls sports altogether. And if you look at the Red Bluff case, the tipping point was the girls basketball coach was using the whiteboard in the boys team room, and they didn't have a girls team room at halftime. And a baseball coach, not even another basketball coach, the head baseball coach for the school said, "Hey, girls can't be in here. This is the boys team room. You need to leave." And basically kicked the girls basketball team out of the team room at halftime of their game as they were game planning. You know, the Santa Clara case is a good example of coming to a settlement and deciding early on in your case that you should probably settle because you're about to lose this. And we're going to reiterate over and over again. If you hear the names Elizabeth Kristen and Kim Turner, they are plaintiffs' counsel on the phone. You need to start thinking real smart decision making about having them as partners in fine tuning your opportunities for growth.
Yes, thank you for that. And we'll, as we, near the end of this presentation, we'll give you some step-by-step guidelines to maybe at least to consider before you get in the situation that we found ourselves in Sweetwater. And so just a little bit about the Sweetwater case. Again, starting in about 2007, there were some initial complaints. And at Castle Park High School, it was a classic softball, baseball, comparable sport situation is usually where the Title IX folks it can really dig in and make some findings. And so this was a baseball, softball, about field conditions, about equipment, access to locker rooms, access to team rooms, concessions. All of these things ended up being considered in this case. And the stance from Sweetwater at that point was Title IX is really for collegiate sports. It's not really, as it applies to gender equity, not really applicable to high school sports. And Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is where the case ended up in 2014. And at that point, the Sweetwater legal team had said, you know what, the next step is, and we had lost in those cases. Each case starting at, since it's federal law, starting in the federal jurisdiction here in San Diego County, all the way up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, we had lost the cases each time, and we were found to have violated Title IX law in the specific cases. Again, the softball, baseball, that there were extreme disparities between the softball program and the baseball program, and at that point, at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, there's one more level. That's the Supreme Court, and to put on a case at the Supreme Court not only takes a lot of legal money, from the district, but there's also plaintiffs' counsel that you have to consider, especially if you lose. And so, and it was a lawsuit on behalf of the players. I think, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's 4 or 5 players named in the lawsuit.
I believe it was 5. And I think the question of the day is that is there anybody in this room that wouldn't want to have $10 million right now in your pocket for your athletic programs? Because ultimately, that's what it costs us, $10 million settlement, cash money, not to mention the fact of all the other expenses that Dr. Moore is going to cover.
Yes, so the $10 million settlement was the legal fees that were paid to plaintiffs' counsel and the settlement award to plaintiffs' counsel for violating Title IX and dragging them through the court case. And so it's real money, real dollars, and a real impact to your program. But at the same time, I think the lesson that we learned was that there are some things you can do on the front end of that. Now, I want to have complete transparency here. I didn't join Sweetwater until 2016. So, I'll share with you some results that have been here since 2016. But so I wasn't part of the decision making around not going forward with the Title IX, and not working with the plaintiff's counsel on this. We'll talk about that in a moment. I want to share with you really what it came down to for um, the Sweetwater case in Castle Park. So when the initial complaint came in again in around 2007, the district hired an attorney, and that attorney did an overview and wrote a report. It's the report by attorney Miss Hernandez. And I'm sorry, it was 2006 that she finished this report. Report of investigations of alleged Title IX violations at Castle Park High School. And she was an attorney paid for by the district, working on the district's behalf. And as expected, she concluded that there were absolutely zero Title IX violations at Castle Park. And this was the document that we used forward in the court cases to say, no, we've looked at this, the access to facilities, the quality of facilities, the quality of the uniforms, all of these things, no Title IX violations. The plaintiff's counsel hired a lady, Dr. Donna Lopiano, PhD. And Donna Lopiano wrote a report in 2008. So 2 years after Ms. Hernandez had filed her report, it took her 2 years of research, and she did her conclusion. And after the initial lawsuits, the Lopiano report, which ended up being about 100 or so pages, she made 47 Title IX and Title IX related findings at Castle Park. And it ranged from everything from the quality of the facilities, the availability of concessions, numbers of pictures in the yearbook for male and female sports, access to lockers and locker rooms, 47 Title IX violations. And so when you put the two cases up, the two reports up in court against each other, Lopiano, who has testified in front of Congress regarding Title IX, is widely considered as one of the foremost experts on Title IX, was hired by the plaintiff's counsel. And so in every time we were in court, her report prevailed. And so the lesson here is you can hire a counsel, we all have law firms that we work with, or our own counsel, in-house counsel. But when the Title IX experts start to get involved, the findings that they can make that you may or may not even be considering as Title IX concerns are astonishing, and you just have to consider them. And so this was the crux of the Sweetwater case. We for years, as we wound through and all the way to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, believed that we were not violating Title IX based on our own internal and attorneys, the attorney that was working with our district, that based on that counsel, and their Title IX team found something drastically different and prevailed each time. So ultimately what resulted in 2014 was a very extensive compliance plan that's broken up into, I think it's 13 different components, wherein every quarter, and so it's 3 times a year, then we do an annual report. So essentially every quarter there's 13 different components that we share with legal aid at work, as well as with a federal judge, because this is a court-ordered compliance plan. It's not. It was a settlement agreement reached with the court, with the federal court, as well as with plaintiff's counsel, and so we share this report. And we agreed to a 10-year compliance plan. So until the year 2024, we are researching and writing the components of this report, and we're sharing with, and Bob and I will talk to you specifically about what we are sharing with plaintiff's counsel. And then obviously we're going to talk about what some of the outcomes of this work has been, and some of the lessons learned. But we, in addition to the $10 million settlement that was paid out by the district, we also pay plaintiff's counsel, legal aid at work, $60,000 a year to review these 4 reports that we issue out every year. That we also do a annual visit, and we compensate them and reimburse them for their travel to San Diego for their annual visit and inspection. So, I mean, this is, again, all court ordered. So, Bob, if you will, take them through the 3-prong test.
Right on. So all of you that have fallen asleep for the first 30 minutes, this is where you need to wake up, because this is where the rubber hits the road, right? Even you guys out there in the valley that think this might not come out and touch you way out there in the valley, this is where it all happens right here. There are 3 ways, my friends, that you can establish under the law that you've met your requirements for Title IX. And the one that's at the top is prong 1, and it's circled for a reason. Because when you hit prong 1, that's like the gold standard. It's not going to keep you from maybe getting a phone call about, your softball field being in disarray and your baseball field being immaculate. But at the same time, it's going to lessen some of these hardships, or I shouldn't say hardships, but these commitments that you're going to have to make to improving your programs later. So substantial proportionality is really simple. You take your percentage of females enrolled at your school, and you make sure that percentage is at the same level or more for the number of females participating in your athletic programs. So even here at Hilltop Middle School, where I run after-school sports for boys and girls, I have 47% of my student population are females, but 56% of my athletes are females. So I'm well above prong 1 for substantial proportionality. And if you look at after today and you go back and you start running your statistics and you start looking at your percentages, you're not going to find a lot of high schools that meet prong 1, to be quite honest with you. Football in and of itself is the elephant in the room. The number of kids participating in that sport sometimes outnumber the total number of athletes participating in female sports. So you're going to have find ways to make sure that you can meet either prong 2 or prong 3. And they become a little bit more difficult to meet. So prong 1, substantial proportionality. Your percentage of females enrolled in your school and your percentage of females that are participating in your athletic programs are the same or higher. Okay. Prong 2 is that you have a history of continuing practice of program expansion. So let's say you have a horrible proportionality. You only had 37% of your females participating in sports, but they constitute 50% of your population. Now you got to start building a plan, and that plan has to be, hey, next year we're going to add girls lacrosse, and the year after that we're going to add JV girls lacrosse, and we're going to look at adding field hockey, so that you're building up and you have a plan to make sure that historically you're looking at your female athletes and their interests, and you're surveying them to see what they want to do, and you're building expansion of programs. It doesn't have to happen in a day. And one thing I do want to congratulate the law on, and especially the folks that work at Fair Play, is that there's a clause that says that you cannot meet the standard for Title IX by diminishing an opportunity for boys. So they actually recognize, and they don't expect people to go out and just start canceling boys' sports. I know on 60 Minutes recently, you see the NCAA conspiracy theorists are like, okay, they're using COVID to establish their Title IX numbers, because under a usual circumstance, you can't just start deleting boys sports to make sure that you're meeting proportionality. So you want to have a history of the program. And then the third prong is the one that's really, really hard to prove. And that means that you're going to try to make the argument that you have fully and effectively met the needs and interests of all your female athletes, that you have offered them programs and they have said no. You have said, let's start this sport, and they have said no. And you have surveyed them and they have said, we don't have any interest in expanding any sports. So, we have surveys coming out at various schools, and you might get 25 girls that say, hey, I'd be interested in having badminton. They're going to look at the survey if you're saying you're meeting prong 3, and they're going to wonder if you started your badminton team. And probably one of the biggest things you need to realize is the biggest thing that's going to get you in prong 3 is if you say you're effectively meeting the interests and abilities of your athletes, they're going to ask you, the first thing they're going to ask you for is your cut lists from your female tryouts. And if you are cutting female athletes and saying that you are meeting prong 3, that's going to be an automatic fail because you are not meeting the interests. You should be expanding teams, adding JVs, adding novice, whatever you need to do if you're cutting female athletes. Next slide, Dr. Moore. All right, so when we start talking about Val Bonnet and we start talking about all of the things that are in our compliance plan, this is another good opportunity for a little anecdote. So the best advice I ever got as a father came from a guy that coached me at Mar Vista High School, who said, hey, I see you have a couple sons playing football. And he goes, I want to make sure you don't let your butt get in the way. And I'm like, let my butt get in the way? What are you talking about? And he goes, that's when after the game's over and after the football game, your kids come up to you and they won and they had an exciting game and your son did great, but you say, you know what, Robbie, that was great, but let me tell you how you really should have addressed that block. You don't want to let your butt get in the way. So right now, as we start going through this and we start talking about football versus field hockey, don't let your butt get in the way. You're gonna be tempted to say, but it's football. But Friday night is for football. But the stadium is called the football field. And we're gonna try to change and shift your thinking because you need to realize that some of those antiquated things need to go away as we have a commitment to grow athletes. So this is the laundry list. Everybody will refer to this as the laundry list. These are the key components of Title IX that as you get farther away from substantial proportionality become more important for your school. And what that means is if you're at Castle Park High School under a compliance plan, this is going to be a straight 50-50. It better be even. We're going to scrutinize this list, every single part of it. So each of these is a component of our compliance plan with the courts. And when Dr. Moore and I used to write the reports quarterly, we would have to address each one of these and explain how the opportunities for girls in each one of these situations are equal or better for the girls.
I love how Mr. Hughes said when Dr. Moore and I would write the reports. Mr. Hughes doesn't help me with the reports anymore, but I still have to do them. But on this list, these are the topics where they found 47 individual violations was looking at this list. So some of the violations were in equal opportunity, some of the violations were in recruitment and fundraising and such. So when you say, well, there's not even 40, there was a 3-prong test and this is, an 8 or 9 point list. Where did they find 47 things? There's individual things in this list that if someone's looking for and knows what to look for, they can find disproportionality and disparity. So one of them is the equal opportunity to compete. And it's very simple that regardless of, and this is very important. Again, it's federal rules again, and making sure you're conforming to California law as well as California interprets Title IX, regardless of gender identity, or gender expression. So I hope that in California, particularly in our state, you have the understanding that a student says I'm on the girls lacrosse team, that student and their gender identity or gender expression is they're on the girls lacrosse team. I'm not going to dive into interactive plans with students and ensuring that you're meeting the gender needs of your students, but please know that gender inequity is a Title IX issue. and they have to have equal opportunities to compete. And so there are comparable sports that are by gender, like boys basketball, girls basketball. And then if there's not a comparable sport by gender, that sport needs to be a co-ed sport. So football is a co-ed sport, and that should be a co-ed sport up and down, unless and until you have a comparable girls football league. And there are some states exploring that because they have a large number of girls who want to compete. And in the Sweetwater district, for example, in many districts, wrestling is a co-ed sport, and so you have a team, and there may be boys and girls competing on the same wrestling team. In Sweetwater, because we're under a compliance plan, but also because we had a large number of girls that were competing at our school sites, we have created essentially a girls wrestling league with a separate schedule, and they have matches. And that's how our female students can compete in wrestling. But the students must be offered those equal opportunities to compete.
All right, so we're going to go through this laundry list. We're going to share some of the facts of the matter for my good friend, Coach Ansel Beher, who under the compliance plan has to check these things out each year to make sure they're absolutely perfect, including equipment and supplies. And by that, at Castle Park High School, there has to be the issuance of photos of all uniforms, uniform rotations, to make sure that if the softball team, or I should say if the baseball team has 2 uniforms, a home and away, that the girls have 2 uniforms, a home and away. And if they have 17 bats, the girls should have 17 bats. And if they have a pitching machine, they should have a pitching machine in the girls softball also. It includes every part of equipment. At Castle Park, we count softballs and baseballs and have to account for them in the compliance plan. And I'm not saying that's going to happen to you, but it's something you need to be committed to, because once the scrutiny comes, that's what the expectation is going to be. Uniforms are extremely important. There's a lot of variation, especially between baseball and softball, with the quality of uniforms and how they're doled out to girls versus boys. Your like sports are going to need to be closer. Basketball and basketball, soccer and soccer. You shouldn't have like designated practice equipment that's only for the boys basketball team. So if there's a free throw rebounding machine for the boys, it better be utilized by the girls also.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Hughes, what if though my booster club fundraised for some brand new baseball uniforms, but my softball booster club didn't fundraise for that?
That's an excellent question, Dr. Moore, because and I think that the plaintiff's counsel would explain it very easily. The law does not care who pays for it. The law does not care how the money was fundraised. The law does not care other than that there's equal opportunity. So if you allow your booster club to purchase 7 different uniforms for the boys baseball team, then you better have a plan in place to have 7 different uniforms for the girls softball team.
Thank you. Let's see. This is locker rooms, practice facilities, and competition facilities. Very important. If there's lights only available on one facility, again, the like sports are where it really becomes apparent. So if the baseball field has lights and an electronic scoreboard, but your softball field does not, that's a Title IX inequity and easy to spot. Does everyone have availability of locker rooms and office spaces? Does everyone allowed to practice on the field that they would be competing on? And this is where in all of the things that we write for Castle Park High School, we call it the stadium field, because that's what it is. It's the field in the stadium. It's not the football field. It's the stadium field. We play soccer on it. We play field hockey on it. The question you should ask yourself is, does field hockey ever get a chance to practice on that stadium field? Or is field hockey relegated to some field, maybe the outfield of baseball or somewhere else, instead of getting a chance to be on the prime time stadium field? So availability, use, we have to show. One of the violations that we had was that not all of our coaches of girls sports had keys to our facilities, that some of the coaches of the boys sports had keys to the locker room, the ice room, the training supplies, but the female coaches are coaches of girls teams did not. So accessibility and availability of those facilities is also under scrutiny and part of Title IX.
Dr. Moore, a hypothetical question. If I am a principal and my gardening club doesn't have anywhere to build their planter boxes, and my girls softball team is not keeping up their batting cage, would it be appropriate to allow the gardening club to build their planter boxes in the girls softball batting cage?
Only because we've actually had to deal with that is why Bob is bringing that up. But yeah, that's a clear example. If the baseball batting cage is in pristine shape and you go look at the girls softball batting cage and the gardening club is using it as their greenhouse, that's a problem. That's a problem.
All right. One of the things we always like to focus in on, and especially happen at Castle Park High School, is who practices where and when, and what the preferential times are. And that's the big key here is time of day. In basketball, it's kind of easy. You rotate. The paradigm shift we had to have at Castle Park High School to have the field hockey team practice after school on the stadium field during football season was a huge shift from our thinking from the past, but that's what has to happen. Girls have the opportunity to have the most preferential time, which is after school immediately, so that they don't have to go home and come back. They're not, you can't put your girls basketball team always practicing from 7 to 9 p.m. or your girls freshman basketball team practicing from 5:30 a.m. to 7 a.m. because that's the only time you want to give them in the gym. You have to rotate those times. And your weight room, I would strongly suggest you look at your weight room and make sure that it has opportunities for your female athletes, including smaller weight sizes, pictures, and things that would invite female athletes to want to use the weight room. That's a big thing at Castle Park High School. And make sure that you're looking at your schedules and make sure, the boys wrestling team doesn't get to go to seven tournaments in Las Vegas and Reno and all over the place, and your girls wrestling team doesn't have any opportunities to travel.
Yeah, Mr. Hughes, regarding the weight room though, the football team has 2 periods scheduled during the day where we exclusively use the weight room for football. Is that a Title IX concern?
Absolutely. There has to be an opportunity for girls to participate in a similar PE class function for female athletes.
Thank you. Scheduling of practices, games and practice times. Look, I realize, and I've been in high school, working with high schools for over two decades. Friday night, homecoming, the lights turn on, the music's blaring, it's football night. And that has been a tradition. It's not just here in San Diego, it's all over the country. And there's a lot of pomp and circumstance surrounding that. And I'm not suggesting that that doesn't happen and that, there's no more Friday night lights. What I am suggesting, though, is that field hockey is a same season of sport, and the dimensions of a field hockey field are similar to the dimensions of the football field, and having access to, and now one of the CIF rules is that field hockey needs to play on a artificial turf surface field and not a grass field, because there are so many variations of the blades of grass and how the field is cut. And so the playoff games for CIF field hockey and championship game are played on turf fields. So making sure that your students have access to those kinds of stadium situations if they're on your campus is crucial and can absolutely be a Title IX concern. If the football field and your football coach says this is the football field and nobody else gets on it during football season, that's time you have to have a talk with your coach, because the whole crux of Title IX is access and opportunities for female sports, and field hockey by and large is a female sport. And so giving students access to that field and that facility is something that you need to prioritize. And at Castle Park, yes, we have field hockey games on Thursday nights, Friday nights, under the lights, with the band and cheerleaders there for field hockey as well. It's part of our compliance plan.
So let's talk about coaches. I know in the current environment of high school sports, especially, it's really hard to find coaches. Sometimes you're in Sweetwater District, we have about 85% of our coaches now are walk-on coaches. Teacher coaches have become sort of a thing of the past. So we're recruiting a lot of different coaches from a lot of areas. The expectation is that, and if you see this example here, the boys and girls basketball coaches, that you're having a girls basketball coach that has similar or better credentials, so to speak, resume as the boys coach. And they're going to, if you're going to a compliance plan, or if you can find yourself in that trouble, you're going to be providing those resumes, and you're going to be doing active recruitment, like not passive recruitment, but active recruitment of coaches for female sports. And Dr. Moore and I used to go out to USD, and we would interview all of their graduates that were interested in coaching. We would hold coaching seminars. We would go to recruiting events. We would literally post in various athletic places, hey, we're looking for coaches for female sports. We would send all the national associations flyers, and the expectation is that you're looking for coaches that are qualified for the girls teams also. And then for compensation, you know, you want to look at your district plan. I know some of you work on these unit systems where the principal gets to decide how many units for each coach. Be very careful with that, with like sport coaches. So your boys and girls head basketball coaches should be getting the same stipend. And they should have the same work conditions in terms of access to team rooms and showers and locker rooms and halftime spaces. Again, two of the biggest lawsuits you're going to see, including Red Bluff and the one in Hawaii, is that retaliation was key to the lawsuit, and that the coach who raised the concerns about not having these opportunities was either fired, pushed out, or even the athletes were threatened.
You maybe heard me before, but publicity was mentioned before, and I talked about having band and cheerleading attend field hockey. You should take a look at the schedule for your band and cheer. Do they only attend and perform at football games? Is your pep squad only at football games? Do they go to any what are traditionally, you know, female sports? I get it that football's co-ed, but when we look and we peel back the numbers of football, football is a mostly male-dominated, boy-involved sport. And so, you know, making sure does your marquee advertise in, you know, the female sports this as similar rate as the male sports. And we turn in for our compliance report, we have to turn in the bulletin announcements at Castle Park, the daily bulletin announcements, and we get a report back from the plaintiff's counsel indicating how many times boys sports were results of boys games were announced versus the results of girls games, even to the point where plaintiff's counsel said, well, you highlighted players and gave shout outs to boys teams, but you didn't do that on the girls team, to which we had to provide a correction for that and go back and make sure that our bulletin announcements are showing gender equity. I mentioned counting pictures in the yearbook. That was one of the findings that was made when we were under initial Title IX review, was how many pictures of boys sports do you have in the yearbook versus pictures of girls sports? What kind of coverage is going on in the newspaper, in your school newspaper? Are the scoreboards adequate and comparable for the different sports? Do you have scorekeepers at all of your games? If the boys teams, for instance, basketball, have a staff appointed, scorekeeper, and the girls team has a manager or another student keeping scores and stats, that's a Title IX concern. It could be a Title IX problem. Are PA announcements made, only for one sport? I know a lot of the baseball teams like to have the come up to the plate, approach the plate music. Is that only happening at baseball, or is that also happening at softball? Do you even have the ability to play music or make an announcement over PA on a softball field? Because do you even have a sound system? Again, all of these things are absolutely scrutinized and looked at. And should you get a Title IX complaint and should there be an in-depth study at your school, these things are the things that will be looked at.
All right, recruitment. So another one on the laundry list is recruitment, and we're talking about recruiting athletes. And this cannot be passive recruitment where you just have one day where you say, hey, we're going to have signups for this, everybody show up. This is well beyond that now. So at Castle Park High School, Mr. Kajewski, especially the champion of girls lacrosse at Castle Park High School, would do many lessons in PE for girls lacrosse for a couple weeks to be part of this recruitment process. We would have demonstration by sports and athletes at lunchtime for girls sports to recruit athletes. Bernie, the AD, would go to Castle Park Middle School and take all the student athletes, female student athletes with him to demonstrate their sports at the middle school PE classes. This is active recruitment of girls, and where it's going to really help you and where you're going to have your documentation is if you can't meet prong 1. So if you're looking at prong 2 or prong 3 as your manner in meeting your obligation under Title IX, recruitment is going to be extremely important, and you want to make sure you're documenting this with pictures and sign-up sheets and really pushing to recruit athletes. And your coaches should have you should have an expectation of your coaches that they're doing this regularly.
Folks, I know that this was scheduled until 5. We have about maybe 10, 15 minutes more of the presentation. We want to give also time for questions. So I would say about 10 minutes and then time for questions. So if you can just hang with us, we're going to be here. And as long as Mr. Hines and Mr. Kaysen have us and CIF has us, we're going to be here to keep presenting. So thank you if you can hang in there just for a few more minutes.
You're good, Vernon. Go ahead and keep going, guys. You're good.
Thank you. Fundraising, folks. I asked the question I asked before about the baseball booster team raising a ton of money, but the softball team not raising a lot of money. But fundraising ends up being really one of the snafus that many schools find themselves in as it relates to Title IX. Some of our programs have massive booster clubs that make massive contributions to our schools, and that's great. That's excellent. We want the participation in our community. Can it be a Title IX problem? 100%, because just as Mr. Hughes said earlier, what the law states is it's really not about where the money comes from. It's, is there an inadequacy? Is there an inequity, I should say? Is there a discrepancy? And if a discrepancy exists because of fundraising, then it is up to the school to address it. What we tell our coaches, particularly at Castle Park, is when a major contribution comes in, maybe there's a former player that's from the school who's now a professional baseball player, and that professional baseball player wants to make a nice, kind and generous donation to the school and build a brand new batting cage, right? Well, what we generally say is, hey, can some of the donation that you're going to make, we go to the donor directly and say, donor, can you apply some of that donation to our girls program, in a comparable way that you're applying it to the boys program? I mean, that is a conversation. The next question is, and most people who, when you put it to them that way, that we have Title IX obligations, we don't want one program to outshine or outweigh the other program, most people are very accommodating for that. That's what we have found. But if there's some way where somebody isn't going to make a similar contribution, and you always want to get the contribution, you want to keep it so you have it in the sport, then you got to start looking at, for example, if somebody's making a contribution for uniforms, look at the next time that team is coming up in your uniform rotation. Because if they're getting new uniforms this year, do they need a brand new set of uniforms in the next year? And if they don't, then maybe you can use some of that money to rectify and resolve what could be a potential Title IX conflict. There's other trade-offs that you can make, and sometimes they come down to some individual things, but it simply cannot go unrecognized. You cannot knowingly have an inequity on your campus, even if it's an inequity caused by fundraising, and just say, well, there's nothing we can do about it. The booster club for this team is just awesome, and the girls don't do any fundraising, so why should we care? It is still a Title IX violation, and should there be a complaint, you will still be obligated and responsible for it. So be very mindful of your fundraising. In this district, in Sweetwater District, all fundraising and all donations to programs get evaluated by the compliance office. And the first question that many ADs in my district have been asked is, how are you going to ensure equity for girls sports if I see a massive donation for boys sports? So it's just a question that you have to ask when you're dealing with fundraising. As I mentioned, one of the things that happens on the Castle Park campus as a result of our compliance plan is we have an independent expert come and review our facilities. And so the first review back in 2014, they reviewed the entire facility so that we could get a real good grasp on where we were in Title IX. But because our Title IX compliance plan was really focused on baseball and softball, these current, the last few years, the facilities review has been baseball baseball and softball facilities, just looking at those two and making sure that they're comparable. We get reports, of course, when you pay for these independent experts to come on your dime and review your facilities. But getting that independent, a person that's not an employee of your district, to come out and review your facilities is absolutely crucial and critical in this work. And Bob, can you talk a little bit about our independent experts that we've worked with?
Absolutely. So again, Castle Park is like it just is the case, right? It's the case. It's the big one. So we have Val Bonnet, who is the independent expert, who comes in, and Val wrote this book right here, and I would highly recommend it. I have my copy here on my shelf. It's not like the textbooks from high school that I never touched. I've read it over and over again, and I have my pages marked because it is the Title IX Bible, and I love the fact that she wrote it in plain English, because she's not writing it like a lawyer. She was an investigator. She was a Title IX investigator for the Office of Civil Rights. So she was the one out there, in the sticks and in the thick of things, making the determinations of if something was a violation when they complained to the Office of Civil Rights. She's a great lady, and she represents and comes out, and she's very fair-minded, but she is at a very granular level. And I'm talking about checking, everything in the baseball and softball comparison, from lockers. Are they the same space? When this was really contentious, when this first started with Sweetwater, they literally, and this is not a lie or a made up, they measured the gap between the links and the chain link fences on the outfield fences of the softball and baseball field to see if one was bigger than the other. we are still, and this is one I couldn't let go of, font size matters in Title IX. There is a complaint that the font on the outfield markers for softball should be the same font that is on the outfield markers for baseball. I mean, that's how granular this is. So Val Bonnet is our independent expert, but the Plaintiffs' Council also gets to bring their independent expert, and they bring world-renowned national softball champion at that small school up in Los Angeles that Dr. Moore went to, the University of California at Los Angeles. And she, actually, I love Sue. She's a great lady, great conversation, knows everything there is to know about NCAA sports. But I will give you one anecdote that tells you the extent to how contentious this was when we first started. In one of the first inspections, the judge was actually at Castle Park also to view these expert witnesses. And Sue took a baseball and she rifled it into the dirt on the infield of the baseball field. And she looked at everybody that was there, and then she walked over to the softball field and she took a softball and she rifled it into the dirt on the softball field. And she goes, "See, this dirt is too compacted. Someone's going to get hurt in the softball field." And everybody's looking like, what just happened? But that's how granular and the nature of this. But Sue is very good. We've come to be partners with her and the Plaintiffs' Council, and we had our commitment, moved forward with our commitment. And I want to congratulate Bernie and Miss Vicki Mitrovich, and even old school Ed Badgett and Michelle Owens for the great work they do out there for committing to the female athletes. But it is quite the sight to see when you have two independent experts looking at everything from even like the decals on the bullpen and the warning track, and whether the warning track is appropriate and how low the grass is cut, and the lip of the infield, and all those types of things.
And folks, Val is a local. She lives here in San Diego County, and so if you're in need of a independent expert because you find yourself in that situation, you can give myself a call, or you can look her up. It's Good Sports is the name of her company, and again, just great resources. Just want to really quickly talk about that substantial proportionality. And this is, I think, really the fruit of the labor. Again, we've been in a compliance plan since 2014. And so starting in 2016, the results that we have, we've been substantially proportional at, we've had substantial proportionality at Castle Park since 2016. It's 2016-17 school enrollment for females was 47%, but our athletic participation was at 50%. You'll see there 47.9%, 54.6% female participation in athletics. Again, 44.8% female enrollment, but 53% in athletics. And then this last year, 47% female and 79.1% athletics. And that SB 1349 is this data I just shared has to be posted in a very prominent place on your school and district website. And you need to be storing this information, I think all the way back to 2015. And so I'm just got, right before I got on this call, I got off of a federal program monitoring FPM call, because of course we're doing FPM this year in Sweetwater, the COVID year. And they were looking for this SB 1349 data. That was one of the questions and one of the places she was looking for it. So just make sure you know that this is the data that they are looking for as it relates to this, and it's part of FPM as well. So just kind of the last part of this, these are the last few things. There's 3 steps that, you know, we just want to make sure we go over to avoid using Sweetwater as a model of what to avoid. These are the steps that you can take right now before you've even received a Title IX complaint. So you can look and identify your external legal compliance, look at SB 1349 and SB 1375. Make sure that your Title IX compliance information is posted and folks know who to contact. You can address, do some things internally. Audit your athletic facilities and do some questionnaires and surveys. Every year we distribute district-wide a survey to our students so that we can analyze that data and make sure that we're adding sports. Sometimes we get things like we want a boxing club or we want a surfing club, and depending on how many of those you get would tell you, is that even feasible to do. But having questionnaires and surveys and that kind of data, if you're not at substantial proportionality, will absolutely help you in prong 2 or prong 3 to address growing girls sports. Audit your team levels. Audit your coaches, meaning find out what experiences your coaches have, and are your more experienced coaches in the boys sports versus the girls sports. Certainly consult with counsel, a legal counsel that's knowledgeable about Title IX, or an outside agency like we've provided you, and there's a resource page at the end of this presentation also. And make sure you're training folks. Coming to a training like this, looking and reviewing information. I'll also share with you at the end of the presentation some resources for some training opportunities outside of the school district or CIF. So maybe somebody has shared with you a concern. Maybe it's just a concern at this point and not a formal complaint. Like maybe somebody said, hey, the softball field at such and such high school isn't quite up to par to the baseball field at that high school. And please let me tell you is that Title IX is at the school as a unit level. So you can't compare school A's softball field to school B's softball field. You can compare school A's softball field to school A's baseball field. So it's within the same school is where the Title IX comparisons are made. If you get a concern from a community member, make sure you thank that reporting party. Sometimes, and I've seen it happen, sometimes people say things like, hey, we don't do this here. We don't worry about Title IX. You can go take that Title IX stuff and go shove it. If that's your response, or a coach's response, or someone in your athletic program's response, know that that's going to be very problematic for you. Because just as Mr. Hughes said, retaliation is one of the enhancements that they make when Title IX complaints are brought forward. If you fire the coach or take action against the person who complained, maybe you cut the family who made a Title IX complaint, you'll find yourself in some pretty deep legal hot water. Look to resolve it informally. Then, do a strategic analysis of the concern. Audit the conditions. Work with your site-based leadership and try to resolve the concern. And then ultimately, do a full site analysis. And Val Bonnett's book has all of the worksheets, every single questionnaire and worksheet that you would need to conduct a full site analysis. And if you don't have that, or you can't afford the book, give us a call and we can send you all of the worksheets and stuff that we use. And lastly, I'm going to tell you right now, if you get a letter from Fair Play for Girls in Sports, if they send you a formal complaint letter or give you a call, breathe and don't panic, but do not be defensive. Do not say, you guys are barking up the wrong creek here. You don't know anything. I'm not afraid of any lawyers. Because that just means that's a signal to them that they're going to come down and they're going to hire Donna Lopiano to come and do, and she'll find 57 violations at your site. Breathe, don't panic. First impressions matter, and look to have an open dialogue with if you get a formal complaint letter. The worst thing is to be defensive. Begin to understand what's the nature of the complaint. Is it a facilities issue? Is it an access to facilities issue? Is it uniforms? Is it, what is the nature of the concern? Phone a friend. call somebody. There's many districts, including Sweetwater, that's been through this. Consult, and that has, worked through a Title IX complaint. Consult with counsel and your own legal counsel, and maybe even identify an external expert to come in and consult with. As I mentioned, Val Bonnet is, she is a local resource. She's here in San Diego County. And finally, develop a plan. Listen to and identify the disparities. Create a plan to address it, and with a timeline. Some things can't be fixed immediately. Some things, because if you have to reconstruct a softball field, it takes planning and time. But creating that timeline and being realistic about it and allocating funding is steps that you have to take. If you just ignore it, well, Bob, tell them what you get if you just ignore it.
Yeah, so ignoring it or wishing it away, or just kind of saying, well, that's just kind of how we are. That's how it's been. That's going to constitute what they call deliberate indifference. Deliberate indifference is another enhancement. And what happens is that when the complaint comes, there's a string of emails, phone calls, conversations that are documented where people raised concerns, and the administration or the athletic administration was deliberately indifferent and just didn't pay it any attention, because that Title IX is, we did it at Sweetwater. We were deliberately indifferent because we thought it was an NCAA problem. We didn't see it as a high school problem. And if you think, I'm way out here in Calipatria, it's not going to happen to me, or I'm over here in this part of San Diego, it's not going to happen to me. It's going to happen everywhere. And I just want you to be aware. I will go back to fair play for girls in sports. That's the third name change I think we've seen from the Plaintiffs' Council since we've been dealing with them. They were legal aid at work for a couple of years, and they were the Women's Law Center before that. But they have a wide variety of webinars on their website that you can learn directly from them what they're looking for when they're talking about fair play in sports. I would suggest that you look at those. But deliberate indifference, if you just think, this is going to go away, it's not a big deal, and retaliation are your two biggest.
Yeah, and folks, also, just a little legal note, and the general counsel of our district would want to make sure folks know this, is there's no limit to attorney's fees in a deliberate indifference case. Meaning, in some cases, there's a cap on attorney's fees that can be charged. If a district is found to be deliberately indifferent and have reckless disregard, there's no cap to those attorney's fees in that case. So that's where a $10 million bill might be in the future. So as we wrap up here, and we'll stay on for any questions that you guys have, but this is a list of resources and web pages. As Bob indicated, if you go on to the Legal Aid at Work Fair Play for Girls in Sports website, tons of information. And if you go to Good Sports Title IX, that's Val Bonnet's website, tons of information. But you can also go on to our district webpage for the Sweetwater Union High School District, and we've got links to most of these pages. And finally, just a little plug for ATICSA. They are some of the foremost leading experts in our country around Title IX. They're a group of experts. We've had them come and present just to our district. And as it relates to the TICSA, there is like a super institutional membership. I would probably caution you about that, but the individual membership is like about $200 a year, and they have a wealth of resources, a library of resources. I will say they're a little more heavy on the sexual assault, sexual harassment side, but they also have a component of their team that works with equity in athletics. So this is our presentation from Mr. Hughes and myself. Our contact information is there. If you would like this PowerPoint presentation, I mean, A lot of it is pictures and such like that. But if you would like it, let me know, or let Mr. Hines know, and we can get this to you. But we definitely want to, be open for questions, and um, hopefully get a chance to, everyone can leave with just a little bit more information than you came here with.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moore and Mr. Hughes. The one thing I'll add is, having worked in the trenches with these gentlemen the last 6 years, is a lot of the discussion today was about Castle Park High School, but and you heard them mention the $10 million for attorney's fees. But what I will also tell you is, having worked in the athletics realm, we're not even scratching the surface about the number of potential people that called in with Title IX concerns and Title IX complaints, which gave us as a Sweetwater district, and for them even moving forward, a whole new understanding of how to approach those and how to handle those issues. And what they didn't share with you is there's probably another $10 million amount on the other side of that has gone into facility upgrades throughout the Sweetwater district based on these Title IX issues as well. So the big purpose is, number one, with having them give this presentation today, is just to get you thinking. It's not to go in a full Title IX panic at your school sites and do those things, but it's definitely about anything. And probably the best takeaway you could do is just go back to your sites and just start thinking about some of those things they talked about. We're just looking around your facilities, looking at issues. The fundraising one is huge. The uniform one is huge. Even the facility one is huge. Because believe me, you definitely do not want to go down a road where what they've talked about here is it takes you down the path that Sweetwater's gone down. Because again, many of you, if you tied in Title IX athletics and put it into a Google search, 9 out of 10 times you're going to see Sweetwater as the #1 hit that you see on there. And it's definitely, it's been a very enlightening experience doing that. But again, at the end of the day, I think the main takeaway is, if you're doing it, if you're approaching your athletic programs through the lens of equity, you're doing the right thing. And at the end of the day, that's the way we should be operating. So keep that in mind. Again, I truly appreciate Bob, Vernon, you guys being on here. I will tell you, they put their contact information on there. They're 100% wide open to, if you guys ever have issues or concerns, they will absolutely, they're the most approachable folks and responsive. And as much as they talk about Title IX and do this, once they get going, they love speaking to people about that and helping folks out and being a resource. So just know that they'll always be there. Again, from our perspective and from the CIF's perspective, we had over 100 people on this call. We truly appreciate these professional development series. We're going to continue to do those with different monthly topics. Many of you have provided professional development ideas or things that you'd like to hear about. And that's the whole idea of these, is to provide this as a great resource for all of you to hopefully be a beneficial, PD every month, and something that helps you and builds capacity with you as athletic directors, athletic administrators. And again, we truly appreciate that. Bob and Vernon will stay on for a while. If you guys you're welcome to stay on, and we'll be on here if you have specific questions. Their contact info is there. If you don't have it or you need contact phone numbers, I'll give you both all their home addresses and cell phone numbers, so you can call them with those two. But if you have problems contacting them, let me know. I can definitely put you in touch with them. But again, Bob and Vernon, thank you so much. And to all of you guys, I know we're hoping for good news soon. Let's all keep the faith that when we come back from the Christmas break, something good's going to happen. I know things are looking tough right now, but again, we all need it. Our schools, our kids, our communities do. We'll keep the faith. All of you, I wish you the best of holiday seasons, and thank you for everything you've done and all your hard work up to this point. And we'll hope we get going into 21. It's a whole different year than 2020. Quite frankly, glad to see it go. So again, from all of us at the CIF office, Todd, I don't know if you have anything else you'd like to share.
No, just thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks to Mr. Hughes and Dr. Moore. I think we should open it up for questions.
Absolutely. So guys, again, feel free to stick around if you have questions. And again, if you're taking off, then thank you all and have a great holiday season. Guys, and if you want to just type questions, if you guys have questions, and type them in the chat, we'll go through and fire through them as many as we can. Feel free to stay on as long as you want. We'll let Vernon and Bob go through those here and take turns. So Ron, do we have any questions in the chat yet, Ron? I'll let you just kind of go through, Ron, and if there's any questions in there specifically, maybe call out the person, they could ask their question.
No, nothing yet.
Nothing yet? Okay.
Joe, the
Hey,
good news is we're still free, so yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Nancy. Hi, Mr. Hines.
Go ahead, Coach.
Dr.
Yeah.
Moore, how are you doing? I want to just say that maybe it's better that you just talked to Dr. Lopiano in regards to Title IX and didn't have to get in the batter's box against her, because when I was younger and she was younger and playing softball against her, she's something else. So maybe it's a good thing you
Nice.
didn't have to bat against her more than that. But
You're
I also-
you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
he's something else. Plus, just because I remember way back when this got started and coaching softball and having to give, being called down to the district. So people they really do want to be careful, because I was called down there and asked lots and lots of questions from both sides with the lawyers when this was way back getting started. So it's definitely, you guys have done a great job, and I seriously appreciate what our district has done for girls athletics. So you guys, thanks a lot, and have a great holiday, you guys.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Coach.
Coach.
Ron, I think we got a couple questions in there now. I think Steve might ask one.
Yep, I got one from Steve. It just says, actually, what if things are reversed? Girls' uniforms or facilities are better than the boys?
That
So
is
that-
a great,
Yeah, that's a
great
great
question.
question. Go ahead, Bob. Jump in.
So remember who the protected class is in Title IX. The protected class is the female. So conceivably, Title IX is to protect a historically disadvantaged group where we didn't have opportunities for female athletes. So in fact, they can be better, but you do want to try to have your systems and your opportunities be equal.
Questions, guys? Any other questions from anybody? Feel free.
Yes, I have a question.
Absolutely.
Do you happen, and hi, Joe, I went to school with you at Chula Vista High School a long time ago.
All right.
So, but now I'm in Calexico. So,
I remember you, Alejandra. Absolutely.
there you
Elementary
go.
and middle school too, by the way.
Yes, middle school too, and your sister Wendy also.
That's
So
right.
I hope everybody's doing good. My question is, because I'm the Title IX coordinator, so my athletic director is here. For Sweetwater, do you happen to have a checklist or like a walkthrough list that maybe I could ask you for? I'm going through a TICSIA also. I'm just starting, okay? I was one of those. You are now the Title IX coordinator. Yay. So and now I'm learning sports. So yeah, yay. But it's good because I love it. So now if is there a checklist or is there something, a guide? I know you presented the book, but I'm looking for a quick way to just get started with it. Do you have anything like that?
We absolutely do. And if you want to email me at vernon.moore@sweetwaterschools.org, I can email you back with that information. But we for sure have some checklists that we have used, plus just some briefer, more condensed presentations that we've done just with some background information and such about Title IX. And what I'll say is, this is generally how Title IX works, is that, somebody is tasked with it and, maybe it's added on. And that's fine as you're learning and getting to know things. Just be mindful, though, that if you get a complaint, and you get a complaint about gender inequity in sports, or even a sexual harassment or sexual misconduct complaint, which could also fall under Title IX, call for help, because I think the biggest thing that I find is folks try to maybe resolve it a certain way or think it's resolved, and they didn't. Some things require possible protocols that you need to follow, and so know that there's folks out here, myself, Mr. Hughes, others. We kind of struggle with the same concerns as well, and we make calls all the time to people who know some of this law a little bit better than we do. And so don't be afraid to ask for help.
Great. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Nice to see you, Joe.
See you, Alejandra.
Got another one. Fellow coaching legend here, Steve Gillette. Bob, just wanted to confirm that you can include cheer now in the counts for proportionality now that it is a CIF sport.
Coach Bulett, excellent question. We didn't have enough girls brackets in the Holiday Classic back in the early 2000s at East Lake High School. The competition cheer is, do you have a competition cheer? Are they competing? Do they have opportunities to compete? Yes, you can count them in your proportionality. If you have a separate and distinct sideline cheer, those are not counted.
Thank you.
And then question from Jen Hahn to Palo Verde. What if a boys team fundraiser for extras like game warm-ups? Those are a want but not a need are provided by the district. Is that still a violation?
So one of the things we didn't cover, and maybe Dr. Moore can chime in also here, is offsets and extras, right? So there could be offsets. The girls or the girls, whatever team that might be. So the equivalent team for girls could say, you know, we already have warm-ups. We don't want warm-ups, or we don't want warm-ups. We want like a jacket. So you could have offsets, right, of comparable equal value based on, and there can be team choice in that. Dr. Moore, you want to talk about it? That's not the case though?
No. You're absolutely right about the offsets. But I just caution you to be very careful. To be very careful about how things are delegated out in fundraising. So teams fundraising and doing things because they're a popular team. So, for example, one of our basketball teams, very popular, that was getting a lot of media attention and coverage. They had asked, or they had a basically a team that does stretching and calisthenics with the team, come and stretch out the boys basketball team before a game, but not the girls team. So in other words, because they wanted to be part of some of the hoopla that was going on with the boys team, because they're very prominent. So they donated services, if you will, and had a team of folks come out and stretching each individual player on the ground and, getting them ready to play the game. But they didn't do that for the girls team. Is that a Title IX violation? So Bob and I aren't in the business of saying, yes, that's a Title IX violation, or no, it's not. We don't even do that in our own district. But we would tell you that that is absolutely something that you would need to be concerned about, in that if you do have a contract like that, we would say that can they work out with the girls team and the boys team pregame? Can they do both, not just one? Or can they alternate between boys and girls and not just one? So that kind of speaks to if one team has warm-ups and duffel bags and some extras, and the other team, doesn't, that can be considered a Title IX violation and a concern that you would need to address. And where it falls down is, what is the impact to the students? How are the students impacted? One team has, and if you think about it from a track perspective, because track is really one of those that there is some meshing. So if the boys track guys had warm-up suits, but the girls track didn't, that would be a problem. I think that would be a glaring problem. And so,
let me give you another. So you always want to seek solutions. So I'll give you a real life scenario. Let's say that you're the school that has a very popular and famous Major League Baseball player that made millions upon millions of dollars. And that Major League Baseball player wants to give back to the school and give all of the baseball team cleats for the season. Well, that happened in our district, and we went to that Major League Baseball player and said, can you do that for the softball girls also, so that we don't have this disparity? And that was the way we found that solution. So you can seek solutions like that. I went to the offsets because we don't want to assume that the girls also want warm-ups. Maybe they wanted something else or needed something else and things like that. But yes, it could glaringly be a problem if your girls are just coming in and they're their top and their uniform bottom, and the boys have the fancy snaps and get to put on the show and pull their pants off, with the flare and all that good stuff.
Dr. Moore and Mr. Hughes, can I ask a question about offsets? Do they have to be dollar for dollar? Is that something that if the boys get this specific amount of dollars, the girls need to get the same exact amount of dollars provided to them for an offset?
So when you're talking about comparable sports, boys and girls, so we're like talking about basketball, volleyball, water polo, it's really hard not to make that dollar for dollar comparison. Again, it's going to boil down to impact on the student athletes. There, where this really becomes tough is, like I said, you've got maybe a boys coach that is just a go-getter for fundraising and gets donations and hustles, and you've got a coach of a girls sport that just that doesn't do that doesn't have maybe the contacts or all of the community buy-in, and so they're sluggish about fundraising. And so, how do you address that? You've got a go-getter versus somebody. You don't want the go-getter to slow down, but what you have to do is you have to tell the coach that if you're creating inequities and there's a differential impact, then that impact has to be addressed. This is the example that the Fair Play Girls in Sports lawyers use. If you had somebody come to your campus and say, I want to build a computer lab, you'd say, great, okay, build the computer lab. And they build it. And then when they're done building it and outfitting it with the brand new computers, they put a sign on the door that says boys only. Would that be okay with you? Would you, if you knew that was the allocation of that donation was going to be boys to only impact boys, would you allow it? And so there will maybe come a time where you have to look a donor and say, well, I'm sorry, we can't accept your donation if it's only going to be to our boys program, because that would create a massive Title IX inequity that we would be responsible for. And I mean, it could be the same for girls. If you're in a situation where you have a massive gender inequity of girls over boys, that's very rare. And I haven't seen a court case where that's played out. But I guess theoretically it could happen. And just as Mr. Hughes said, the protected class when Title IX was written was absolutely, females. So, we get into a lot of these kind of hypotheticals. Where Title IX does offer that discrepancy is it costs more to play football. So if your football team is, the uniforms and equipment for your football team is more than your field hockey team, for example, those are acceptable disparities, because the play of football that should be open to boys and girls, it's a co-ed sport, simply costs more than other sports. That is an allowable disparity. But outside of that, I would be very, very cautious. And I'm going to tell you, I've read articles in the local newspaper about what some of these booster clubs are pulling in and donating to their campuses. And I'm kind of shocked that there hasn't been more Title IX lawsuits in San Diego County. And that's just, again, coming from my perspective and my experience, and working with the lawyers that represent folks who sue for Title IX. So it's just one of those realities.
Very cool. Well, next question I have is Steve McLaughlin. I think you wanted to ask a question yourself. You want to go ahead and unmute and ask?
Yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate CIF putting this on, and I appreciate you guys' time. You kind of alluded to some of my questions that I had in their last statement. We do have a foundation where boosters, individual boosters, give to a program, and our foundation takes in all those donations and then supports our school, kind of what you just mentioned. And we're very fortunate to have that. And I would say our facilities are great and beautiful because of it. But we do have some inequities that we're basically addressing right now. I was wondering, have you guys heard within a foundation if they had any Title IX committees within a foundation where donations all came into one thing and then got divided up between programs to make it fair? I was just wondering if you guys had any expertise on that.
So talking about expertise with Dr. Moore and I is a little, taking a little too, we just experienced a lot. So what we have seen, to be quite honest with you, is we've seen different iterations of that, especially with foundations. One of the ones that I think was an early conception was like, anytime there was a donation, there was going to be a percentage of that donation that was going to go to the equity fund. So a foundation would decide, you can give a donation to the baseball team, but the baseball team is only going to get 75% of that, and the 25% of that will go to the equity fund in case there's an imbalance or a need to rectify that. So that's one solution I've seen to that. There are foundations that are very interested in adhering, especially to these Title IX rules, because ultimately the responsibility, if the foundation does not do that, lies to the student body or to the school district to come up with any remedy. And the law really wants these things to be remedied before they get to lawsuits. So, my advice would be look towards, some people call it the equity tax. They want to put that negative label on it, but I think it's a good idea. If you have the ability within your foundations to have portions go to a fund that is there specifically to rectify any or remedy any imbalance.
And just last year, actually the year before, we revamped our School Connected Organizations Booster Club manual, and we included specific language around Title IX and told our booster clubs that they had a responsibility to not create Title IX inequities on our campuses. And so that is something our principals have been trained in, and they're supposed to be on the lookout for when approving plans for our booster clubs.
All right. Next question is from John Pasapia over at Sarah High School. John, go ahead.
Two questions. Well, first, Dr. Moore, hi. It's been a while, and I don't usually call you Dr. Moore because I've known you for a while. Question being is, we used to have the band come in for just the boys basketball game. I nixed that a long time ago, and they now come in for the girls and boys. We've gone through different band directors, different things. The new band director does not want to come in for both games, basketball, full games. So this past year we went, girls got third and fourth quarter, boys got first and second quarter. That was my remedy. Want to know what you guys think about that one, but I do have a second question about basketball as well. So is that a good remedy?
I mean, it's decent. It's decent. I mean, it sounds like the boys always play after the girls. So.
Right.
Which I know is another issue. I know there's another issue, but I can't control that issue.
Well, the lawyers from Fair Play might think differently. But
I know.
Here's what I really do want to say, though, because John, and good to hear from you, John. Here's what I really want to say, though, is that all of these things and guidelines that we're providing, when you run back and say, oh, they're Title IX violations, well, as I said, we're not in the business of saying you're violating Title IX law. We're in the business of saying, oh my goodness, this is a big concern. Should there be a complaint? Like, should somebody say, hey, at Sarah High School, I'm very disappointed because the band doesn't play at the beginning of the girls' game to introduce the girls' basketball team, and they only play at the beginning of the boys' game. Should somebody give you that complaint? I would hope that you and the team and Dr. Renfrey out there would take a close look at that and say, how can we resolve it, as opposed to saying it is what it is and we can't change it and our band director won't do it. Ultimately, what I would end up with is, if there wasn't an accommodation that could be made, is then the band isn't at the games. And, parents might complain and such like that. But the problem with, the kind of mentality, I think a better solution than the third quarter, fourth quarter for the girls game and the first and second for the boys is alternate. So today, on this day, you're going to play at the boys game, and then the next time you're going to play at the girls game, and the next time you're going to play at the boys game, because that's really what it's all about. It's about not having the disparities, not having the inequities. And so alternating, just like you alternate practice times or practice days sometimes, is probably your best way to do that. You said you had a second question?
Yeah, well, and we have done that as well. That was we have done that where it's just the boys game or just the girls game and we alternate. Second question was, and you kind of alluded to it just there, was with the practices. We do rotate practices times, but we do it every year. We go to a different. I think you're alluding to switching it up during the season. Am I wrong with what you guys are talking about? Because our teams get confused when we switch it up during the season and they show up at the wrong time. So we decided every year girls go and the first couple practices, boys go second, and then next year the flip flop. So is that something that, in, I guess, your opinion, I know you're not you're not gonna, yeah. I know what you said, but exactly, in your opinion,
it's all fun and games until somebody pokes their eye out. So it's only it's all theoretical until somebody files a complaint. And so if there's not a complaint about that process, and then when the complaint comes, you say, hey, here's our process, that could work. I would say that best practice would probably be within the season to alternate days, just because, that seems to be most equitable. But
can I chime in?
Go ahead.
I would say that, this is all nuanced, and when you look at your prongs, and if you have substantial proportionality and that's one of your only lingering issues is that you switch every year, you might not get to the granular level of that type of complaint. If I was listening in my head and hearing the plaintiff's counsel from the Castle Park case, they would say to you something to the effect of the girls in that year that only play that year would not get the opportunities, and they would make it that moment in time, and I don't think they would accept the year-to-year thing because it might not be the same athletes.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you, guys.
We're caught up on questions in the chat, so if anybody else has anything they'd like to say.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah. With this upcoming season, I think you guys moved boys volleyball to the same time as basketball. With the schools with only one gym, that's going to be really hard on practice times. Will that go against the Title IX, the boys volleyball taking up time that the girls basketball would be normally getting?
You guys want me to answer that one? Or you guys want to answer that one? I like how both of you are just waiting for an assist on that. So
I don't need an assist.
Yeah.
I probably have already voiced my concern.
So realistically, yes, that's going to be Jim. It's a good question. It's going to create a facility issue for all those sports. So obviously, it's going to require that sport. Obviously, when you look at that, you don't want to create a discrepancy between like sports, boys and girls basketball. You'll have those there. Girls volleyball staying in season 1, boys moving to season 2. That decision was made because of the boys being impacted last year. Ideally, the situation, it's going to, you've got wrestling in there as well. So school sites are going to have to mitigate those logistical issues amongst all those sports and ensure they're not creating inequities for any of those. So that's a challenge for all sports to do. And no matter what, it's going to be beyond difficult to manage all those things going at the same time. So, it's, I don't necessarily know if it's just going to create a issue for just boys volleyball. It's going to create an issue for all season 2 sports. and the athletic directors, athletic administrators just have to be able to mitigate that and create a schedule that's equitable to all those teams. So, you know, yeah, it's absolutely going to be a problem, Jim, but it's something that, you know, obviously we're going to have to work through.
So the plaintiffs' counsel for our case, they generally come down and they meet with us in January or February. So they'll be down here in a few weeks. And we usually get to dialoguing about, you know, what's going on in the world of sports. This will be an interesting year since we haven't had sports yet, and an interesting dialogue. I can tell you what the pre-dialogue has been about, which is, you know, off-season conditioning and cohorts. What are the Title IX implications of that? And I anticipate that they are, because they foreshadowed this. We did have a conversation, not in person, but over the phone in June, because we had to make some changes to our reporting structure since we didn't have sports. We've been closed like probably everybody else on this call since May, or March, I should say. So one of the things that they brought up again was, you know, as we're bringing back conditioning and allowing for sports, is that equitable? Are we having girls come back, or is it just the football team coming back? And that's one of the challenges that they put to us. And then also, I think it's going to be an interesting conversation about the boys volleyball. I understand the decision of boys volleyball moving it to season 2. And they got their season truncated last year, whereas girls volleyball had an opportunity to play a full season. I think that's gonna be sufficient ground to stand on. But I am interested as to what the plaintiffs' counsel would say about that, and so I anticipate that being a point of conversation when we speak in January or February of 2021. So there's a question in the chat about coaches' availability dictating practice time. And, you know, I got to tell you, I mean, that is a concern, because sometimes you're in a situation where if you don't have a coach at all, you know, and if you don't accommodate where, you know, because our coaches, if they're walk on, they have their own jobs and maybe they can only get to the site at a certain time. And so, yeah, all of those things come into play. I'm going to go back to something Bob said. I think that it was a gem. So thank you, Bob. Which was, if you're at substantial proportionality, or you're even approaching substantial proportionality, like you're within a few percentage points of having girls, the participation of girls in athletics equal their attendance rate at your site. So most sites are 50%, 48%, and you are close to that in girls' participation in sports. Then things like practice times and things like, you know, warm-ups versus sweat, you know, hoodies, those kinds of things do become minimal and minimized. But I mean, and things that you can address and hopefully resolve informally. But it's when it's compounded. It's when your percentage points are way off. You're 15, 20% away from substantial proportionality. You've never done an inventory to show what girls' sports are out there and things like that. That's when things that we're talking about really become major issues. Availability of coaches' time, access to facilities, band at the games. So you've got to look at the complete Title IX picture at your site and then start to make those adjustments as needed. And I'll say this one more time, is that it's all fun and games until, like I said, until that complaint comes in and until you receive that first engagement letter from Fair Play Girls in Sports. If you get a letter like that, then you should be looking at everything. And
yeah,
go ahead.
And I love that analogy there. It is the gold standard is substantial proportionality. And remember, the laundry list is 13 components, right? So we had this specific situation 1 year at Castle Park High School, and the plaintiff's counsel was good with it because we hired a very qualified female coach that could not be there after school. So the other part of that coaching resume came in to trump, so to speak, the the fact that it was going to be the not preferred practicing time. So it's always nuanced. It is always nuanced. And the more you get away from substantial proportionality, the more granular it's going to get, and the more susceptible you're going to be to getting that phone call. And I will tell you this, that in all the casework that we've read together, it's always about a fractured relationship that is the tipping point. So you want to keep your coaches happy and informed and trained, and make sure you show them value and work on creating solutions before problems start, and don't be deliberately indifferent.
Sounds like it's dinner time.
Yeah. Anybody have any other questions?
All right.
I want to
Go
shout
ahead.
out to Vicky Mitrovich and her team at Castle Park. I'm going to tell you guys, having a principal that's on board and making sure that the rest of the team plays ball, so to speak, is critical. That is critical. And so I can't thank Vicky and her team enough. Vicky, I know you're on the call. If you wanted to just say a couple of words.
Well, I don't know why can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Gotcha, Vicky.
Okay. I don't know why my computer's not coming on, but it's a team effort, 100%. I have an amazing support team with Bernie and Michelle, and of course, always the go-tos at the district office, but you got to pay attention to detail, and that's what it's about. And no ball is uncounted, no uniform is unturned, and I'm not sure if I would consider it a labor of love, Dr. Moore, but it is something we've been living. My first year there as a principal was the first year the court order went into effect, and I'm hoping to finish it in 2024. So we're in year 7, and I think by the time 2024 rolls around, we will be the experts, and people should hire us, I think. What do you guys think?
But Vicky, do you have your keys? That's all we want to know. Do you have the keys?
Oh my goodness, I carry those keys wherever I go. There's like 900 keys on that goofy keychain. And I take them out every year, Bob. I've never not taken them with me. Just in case, you never know.
So the pun to that story, folks, is that in the first inspection, the principal didn't have keys to all the facilities. So now the plaintiff's counsel wants to see that the principal is carrying the keys to every container, every closet, every facility.
And I got them. Not to say that I can open all the doors because they've been probably jammed for years, but yeah. So anyway, and again, I will thank our district level support. And when Joe was with us, he was very supportive. And Bob, when he was at the district office, amazing, amazing, amazing. And now Dr. Moore is all by himself up there, basically dealing with us. So we appreciate though. And like I said, if we didn't have them, we wouldn't be where we're at. But it is a lot of working together, and especially with our middle school as well. That's another big piece of the puzzle that everybody needs to be aware of, that you really have to work with your feeder middle schools to bring those levels of the levels up for girls sports for sure. So, but it can be done. It can be done. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys. All right, got to jump and go to another meeting, but thank you, guys. Thank you,
everybody.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.